Okay, part two types. So we finished up with labor unions. Let's talk about business. So there's also interest groups that represent business. Um, these, again, like the American Manufacturers Association, the American Automotive Manufacturers Association, realtors. Um, realtors, I don't know, they might be considered a professional organization as well. But an interest group that represents a business, the point of businesses coming together as an organization is that they have more influence over policies in Washington. So, what policies could businesses possibly want to influence? Well, they have a lot of things they would like to be able to influence. For one, tariffs. So if you're a business group, a business interest group, say your interest group represents steel manufacturers, you're going to want higher tariffs on imported steel to protect your industry. So steel manufacturers could go to Capitol Hill and talk to lawmakers in Washington and say, hey, could you raise tariffs on Chinese steel? Because Chinese steel is so cheap and we're unable to sell our steel in our own country because contractors in our own country are buying Chinese steel up. Taxes. Paying lower taxes, corporate income taxes, lower taxes on their profits, lower taxes on the means of production, so they can give consumers the cheapest product, cheap's the wrong one, an inexpensive product at the highest quality. That's what their aim is. Regulations. There's a lot of regulations on businesses. A lot of times businesses have double the regulations, like duplication of regulation from different departments of the government. Right? You might have an anti-pollution regulation coming from the Environmental Protection Agency and an anti-pollution regulation coming from the United States Department of Agriculture. And you're like, hey, why do we have double the number of regulations when we could just reduce it to one? Those are the kinds of things that businesses are going to try to push in Washington. Professional organizations. These are going to be the groups that represent a people that have a certain profession. So the American Bar Association, they represent lawyers. So if you want to be a lawyer, you pass the bar exam, you become a member of the bar, you have standards of quality that you must prove that you are able to meet in order to become a lawyer. The National Education Association, if you are a teacher, myself, and you want to be represented in Washington and you want your job and your profession to have some kind of representation, then you can join the NEA. And what the NEA will do is fight for teachers' rights in Washington and at the state level as well. You pay dues to be a member of the NEA, and they'll send you things like academic journals that teach you the best practices that teachers should have if they want to be effective. They also will provide you with legal assistance if somebody sues you, that kind of stuff. Agricultural, this can be lumped into businesses too, because there's a lot of agribusinesses like Smithfield Foods. And agribusiness is just a really large agricultural business. So again, like Smithfield Foods, like Monsanto. They'll have what they're worried about is farm subsidies. So a subsidy is a payment out to farmers. So if we're talking about tariffs, this is 2018. We are in the midst of a trade war with China. We have slapped those tariffs on Chinese goods. And in retaliation, China has slapped tariffs on soybeans. Chinese consumers eat a lot of American soybeans. Therefore, they are making our soybeans more expensive in China, which means our soybean farmers are having a harder time selling to China. So what you see right now is American soybean farmers coming together as organization, interest groups, lobbying or going to Washington, to Capitol Hill, and pressuring them to get Trump, or going to Trump as well, President Trump, to get Trump to end the trade war with China so they can continue to sell their soybean or their products. Other things that agribusinesses would be worried about is the use of pesticides, being able to use pesticides, herbicides like weed killer, and they don't want to have to worry about following too many environmental regulations because they're worried about making a profit. They're worried about having the best yields on their crops so they can make money. And GMOs, so genetically modified foods and things like that, and whether or not they should have to be labeled. Okay, single issue groups. These are groups that are going to work to promote one specific cause. It's a really old poster. It's from 2008. I should change that. So the best way to explain it is through examples. So these could be like religious related causes. You'll see some single issue groups like the Christian Coalition. They're worried about the protection of free exercise of their religion. All right. The sorry, I was reading a text message. That's awful. See what being on your phone does? It distracts you. You cannot learn adequately if you are always on your phone. There, that's an added lesson in the middle of these notes. The AJC will promote Jewish interest and make sure promoting like the state of Israel, but making sure that there's no discriminatory practices towards people who are Jewish. So that's a very singular based interest. You also have welfare interest groups, and this isn't like welfare payments. These are looking out for the well-being of certain demographics of people. So the American Association of Retired Persons, they look out for old people. Old people, of course, have a lot to lose in this government. You could think about like Social Security and Medicare, anti-discriminatory laws, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, making sure that there's enough parking spots in front of the rec center for handicap parking for older people. That's something that the AARP will work for. Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, they're going to look out for the benefits and the protections of veterans. And then, of course, I've talked about the NAACP looking out for the civil rights and civil liberties of African American community. Then you have groups that are worried about specific aspects of government policy, very single issue focused. NARAL is a pro-choice organization, so they want to make sure that judges that are appointed to the Supreme Court or justices appointed to the Supreme Court are pro-choice, and that a woman's right to choose is preserved in all of the 50 states. The ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, they're worried about civil liberties and protecting the people from government encroachment upon the rights guaranteed to them in the Bill of Rights. Yeah, DUI. Stop, I will drive you. Okay, so the next public interest group. Don't drink and drive. You're going to be listening to these probably on a Friday. There's another little tidbit of advice. All right, so public interest groups. These interest groups are concerned with issues that they think if their issues were passed into law, or their policy that they're pushing lawmakers to pass was made into law, then the world would be a safer place. So like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, that would be an example of a public interest group because drunk driving is awful. You shouldn't do it. Because chances are you won't hurt yourself as much as you would somebody else, and then you would feel awful for the rest of your life. The League of Women Voters, that's also an example of public interest group. They work to try to increase voter turnout, and like we know, increasing voter turnout is better for democracy as a whole. But that's the types of interest groups in a nutshell. Thanks for listening. I will see y'all later.